The scent of jasmine and myrrh was meant to mask the fear. It was the fragrance of a beautiful lie. In the heart of the great city, beneath the indifferent gaze of marble gods and the relentless hum of Rome, a ritual was about to unfold. It was not a dance, nor a toast, nor a whispered promise of forever. It was an inventory, a brutal, clinical verification of worth. She was 16, a girl bride named Livia, and she was a prize of political maneuvering, wrapped in fine silk and garlanded with white roses. But tonight, she was not a wife. She was a ledger entry. The most intimate space of her life, her own body, was about to become a public theater for a contract to be stamped and sealed. What happens when a wedding is less about joining two souls and more about transferring ownership? What happens when the grand, civilized heart of an empire harbors a secret so cold, so profoundly violating, that even its own historians chose to erase it from the scrolls? The lock turned on the chamber door. Livia was not entering a marriage bed. She was entering a court of transaction, and the verdict on her future was about to be delivered by a physician and a room full of strangers. Make sure to watch the video all the way till the end. I promise you're going to find it super informative. We put a lot of hard work into bringing you this content, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and share it with your friends. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates us to keep creating even better videos for you. The journey to Rome had been a parade of stifling, suffocating splendor. Livia was no peasant's daughter. She was of a respected, though not spectacularly wealthy, family from the southern territories. Her father, Senator Cassius, had always looked at her with an appraising eye, a mental calculator clicking behind his stern gaze. When the offer came from the powerful house of the Valeri, led by the ambitious and much older Marcus Valerius, Cassius did not see his 16-year-old daughter. He saw a golden key to higher office and immense wealth. The carriage, heavy with gilt and drawn by 4 white horses, was Livia's gilded cage. Every mile closer to Rome was a mile further from the simple comfort of her childhood bedroom, the scent of the olive grove, and the easy laughter she shared with her younger sister. Inside the carriage, she was always accompanied by her stern, unsmiling governess, who spent the hours drilling Livia on the proper forms of address for Valerius's mother, the correct way to hold a wine cup at a banquet, and the vital importance of duty. "You are not marrying a man, Livia," the governess had droned, her voice dry as parchment. "You are marrying a house. You are a vessel for the Valeri name. Do you understand your purpose?" Livia understood the words, but not the weight of them. She pictured Marcus Valerius as he had been presented to her. A man of handsome, strong features, with a rich toga and a booming, confident voice. He had given her a small, perfectly carved ivory elephant on their first brief meeting. She had clutched it, mistaking his distant formality for dignified romance. She was a child, clinging to the naive hope that inside the arrangement there might be a seed of affection. After all, the poets spoke of love in Rome, didn't they? But as the carriage rolled beneath the towering arches of the city, a cold, sharp dread began to pierce her innocent optimism. Rome was overwhelming, not beautiful but demanding. The crowds were too loud, the Senate House too vast. The very air seemed to vibrate with ambition and judgment. They were delivered to the Valeri Villa, a marble fortress that seemed more suited to holding back an invading army than sheltering a family. It was magnificent, a testament to wealth so ancient it felt like a force of nature. The Valeri women, led by the matriarch, were statues come to life, cold, beautiful, and critical. They examined Livia from head to foot as if she were a piece of livestock bought at the market. They asked her curt questions about her dowry and her health. No one asked about her feelings or her interests. Every conversation was centered on her fitness and her fertility. "Your hips are wide enough, child," the matriarch had announced after a long, unnerving scrutiny at dinner. It was the closest thing Livia had received to a compliment. It made her stomach clench. Livia spent the final days before the ceremony in a state of terrified silence, wandering the cavernous, frescoed rooms of the villa. The only person who showed her a flicker of warmth was a young slave girl named Alara, who was tasked with dressing her. One night, while oiling Livia's hair, Alara leaned close and whispered, "The wedding night. It is not as your mother taught you. Be strong, Domina, mistress. Be silent." The warning was vague, terrifying, and went unspoken, but it echoed in Livia's heart. It was a dark, venomous suggestion of a cruelty that lay waiting just beyond the brilliant light of the wedding day, an unspoken debt she would have to pay. The golden key had turned, and the cage was now locked. She was here, ready for the transaction, and the moment was approaching when she would find out exactly what the true cost of this political treaty would be. The silk of her wedding dress, now laid out, felt less like a garment of celebration and more like a shroud. The wedding day was a sun-drenched, roaring spectacle of Roman power. It was a day designed to impress the gods and terrify the rivals of the House of Valerie. For Livia, it was a blinding, deafening blur. The villa's atrium was packed with senators in immaculate white togas, wealthy landowners, and their heavily jeweled wives. The air was thick with the scent of roasted boar, expensive wines, and the sweat of 100 ambitious people all vying for the attention of Marcus Valerius. Livia was dressed in the traditional tunica recta, a simple white gown woven on an ancient loom, but over it she wore layers of shimmering silk and gold that felt heavy, like chainmail. Her face was covered by a bright saffron-colored veil, the flammeum, a beautiful barrier that shielded her eyes from the intense scrutiny, but did little to stop the whispers that danced around her. She's young, good lineage, wide hips. Will she give him sons? Every glance, every raised eyebrow, was a calculation of her worth, and she felt herself shrinking underneath it all. During the feast, Livia was seated beside her new husband, Marcus. He ate with the focused appetite of a man who had earned his pleasure. His conversations were not with her, but over her discussions of land deals, pending legislation, and the newest legions sent to the frontier. When he did address her, it was only to make a cold, possessive statement. "You have been silent, Livia. That is good. Roman wives should not chatter like Greek slaves," he said, not as a husband offering advice, but as a master laying down a rule. He didn't offer a smile, nor did he touch her hand. He merely took a long, deep drink from his wine cup, the gesture sealing his ownership. She was merely a decoration at his feast, a piece of art that confirmed his status. The music grew louder, the flutes sharp and the lyres frantic. The wine flowed freely, turning the dignified, reserved guests into loud, laughing participants. Livia's father, flushed with pride and drink, clapped Marcus on the back and spoke of the magnificence of the alliance, using words like forever and prosperity. Livia felt a sickening twist in her gut. She remembered Alara's whispered warning and the grim looks of the Valerie women. There was a darkness here that the wine and the music couldn't drown out. As the evening wore on, the ritual shifted. The wedding cakes were broken over Livia's head in a traditional ceremony to symbolize plenty. And then came the moment she had been dreading, the deductio, the procession to the bridal chamber. This was not a private journey. It was a chaotic, humiliating public display. Guests, drunk and shouting vulgar but traditional chants, picked up the torches. Marcus grabbed Livia's arm, the first time he had truly touched her, and pulled her forward. She was surrounded by a crush of people, men yelling coarse jokes about the upcoming work, and women singing the traditional, overly intimate feminine verses meant to ensure fertility. She was no longer Livia, the girl. She was the bride, a symbol, a property being delivered to its rightful place. The air in the hallway was cool, but Livia was sweating under the heavy veil and the weight of the moment. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird desperate for escape. The laughter and the singing felt cruel, mocking. She stumbled once, and Marcus squeezed her arm, a wordless instruction to maintain her composure. Finally, they reached the door to the marriage chamber. It was a heavy, dark wood door, guarded by two grim-faced servants. The crowd pressed close, their faces lit by the flickering torchlight, hungry for the final act. Marcus's mother, the matriarch, stepped forward, her face stern and emotionless, and she pushed the door inward. The room inside was not a cozy, private space. It was vast, dimly lit by oil lamps, and it held more shadows than warmth. Livia saw, with a sudden, horrifying clarity that made her breath catch, the figures of other people already waiting inside the chamber. They were not friends. They were witnesses. They were judges. And among them, a slender, gray-haired man in a crisp white tunic stood apart, holding a small, rolled-up scroll and a tiny, sharp tool. He was the physician. Livia's naive hope shattered like a dropped vase. The terrifying truth of the Roman transaction hit her. This was not a moment of intimacy. This was an inspection. The music of the flutes faded away, replaced by the loud, ringing silence of the room and the finality of the closed door. The heavy oak door scraped shut, cutting off the rowdy, drunken cheers of the wedding guests like a slammed coffin lid. The transition was immediate and sickening. One moment, Livia was surrounded by the raucous joy of a public celebration. The next, she was trapped in a cold, silent room that felt like a courtroom. The air here was stale and still, thick with lamp oil and the medicinal scent of dried herbs. Marcus released her arm. His grip, which had been tight and possessive in the hallway, now simply fell away. He didn't look at her. Instead, he walked toward a small table set with wine and fruit, acting as if the chamber was merely another part of his household business, and she was a matter to be settled before dinner. Livia stood trembling, still wrapped in the heavy saffron veil, feeling utterly exposed despite the layers of silk. Her vision, filtered through the bright fabric, made the figures in the room seem hazy and spectral, but their presence was undeniable. These were the witnesses. Standing closest was the matriarch, Marcus's mother, a woman carved from ice and dressed in the deepest purple. Beside her were two elderly aunts, their faces lined with the harsh judgment of women who had survived this same ritual and now served as its unforgiving guardians. They did not look at Livia with sympathy or warmth, but with a clinical, evaluating intensity, as if checking the seals on a crucial contract. They represented the unwritten laws of the House of Valerie, laws that prized property, legacy, and the purity of the bloodline above all else. Then there was the man Livia had noticed earlier, the physician, a lean man with pale, steady eyes named Gaius. He stood near the marriage bed, which, tragically, was the focal point of the room. He was not a guest, he was a functionary. He held the rolled parchment, his tabulae, on which the outcome of the evening would be officially recorded. He was not concerned with Livia's well-being, but with verification. He was the instrument Rome used to turn a private, intimate moment into a legal, public document. The matriarch finally broke the silence, her voice a low, chilling command. "Remove the veil, child. You are not a mystery here. You are a truth to be proven." Livia's hands shook as she obeyed, pulling the heavy silk away from her face. The sudden light of the oil lamps was harsh. She could see the cold determination in the matriarch's eyes and the utterly professional detachment of the physician. Her heart felt like a hammer against her ribs. She glanced desperately at Marcus, her new husband, hoping for a shred of reassurance, a kind look, or a defense of her privacy. He did not meet her eyes. "Do as my mother instructs, Livia," he said, taking a sip of wine. His words were flat, without emotion. He was allowing this. He was demanding this. He was complicit in the complete dehumanization of his bride. The two aunts stepped forward with alarming speed. Before Livia could protest or even fully understand, they began to strip away the ceremonial garments. The gold jewelry was tossed onto a nearby chest. The heavy silk palla was pulled down. The sacred, simply woven white tunica recta was lifted over her head. Livia gasped, clutching her hands over herself, her face burning with the most intense shame she had ever known. To be naked was one thing. To be stripped in front of a court of judges was another. She was 16, and suddenly she felt very small, very vulnerable, and very much alone. She was standing before these powerful people, an object of clinical scrutiny, waiting for a process she did not fully understand but knew was going to wound her deeply. The physician, Gaius, dipped his quill into a tiny pot of ink on the table, scraping it against the rim. He cleared his throat, holding the tablet ready. The silence in the chamber was suffocating, waiting for the verification of the property transfer to begin. The final, terrible act of the Roman wedding night was now inevitable. The silence in the chamber was broken only by the slight rustle of Gaius, the physician, adjusting his tools. To Livia, his presence felt like a physical violation even before he moved. His hands, though skilled and steady, were not healing hands. They were documenting hands. He approached her not as a patient requiring care, but as a sample requiring inspection. His pale eyes scanned her face, not looking for distress, but for any sign of deception or resistance. "Be still, child," Gaius instructed, his voice low and utterly monotone. It was the voice of a man accustomed to seeing bodies as biological machines, divorced from the souls that inhabited them. Livia was standing in the center of the room, naked and shivering, surrounded by the stern, judging faces of the Valerie women. The matriarch watched with intense, unwavering focus, a silent sentinel of the family's honor. This ritual had nothing to do with ensuring her health or her future happiness. It was solely about proof and property. The virginity of the bride was the guarantee of the house's investment, the certainty that the resulting heirs would be legitimately Valerie. Without this proof, the marriage was invalid, the dowry forfeit, and Livia herself would be returned to her father in utter disgrace. She tried to close her eyes, but the matriarch's sharp voice cut through her shame. "Open your eyes, Livia. Look upon your duty. Rome does not allow secrets in matters of inheritance." The humiliation was overwhelming. It was not just the physical exposure, but the total stripping away of her self-worth. In this moment, she was reduced to the function of her body, a biological tool for producing sons. Every whispered lesson about dignity and modesty her mother had taught her felt like a cruel joke. Dignity was only for the powerful. For the girl bride, there was only utility. Gaius began his examination. It was clinical, swift, and devoid of any human grace. He moved with practiced ease, his fingers cold against her skin. Livia clenched her fists, biting back a whimper. She was fighting a desperate internal battle, trying to retreat into a corner of her own mind where the cold air and the judging eyes could not reach her. She imagined herself back in the olive grove, chasing butterflies, far away from this sterile, terrifying reality. But the rough touch of the physician was a constant, brutal anchor pulling her back to the present. The Valerie women watched every muscle twitch in Livia's face, searching for pain, searching for a sign of guilt. The two elderly aunts leaned forward, their faces eager and critical. Marcus remained standing by the table, nursing his wine cup. He was the most powerful person in the room, the one person who could stop this brutal verification, yet he did nothing. His indifference was a deeper wound than the physician's touch. It confirmed that she was merely a commodity he had purchased, and now he was simply observing the warranty inspection. Finally, after what felt like an eternity compressed into a few minutes, Gaius stepped back. He did not speak to Livia. He turned immediately to the matriarch, his face flat. He offered a curt, professional nod, a silent affirmation that the contract was valid. He then went to the small table, unrolled the parchment, and with careful, steady strokes, dipped his quill and recorded the findings in official binding language, a medical certificate of proven property. The matriarch finally allowed a tiny, brittle curve of satisfaction to touch her lips. The inspection was over. The verdict was rendered. Livia had passed the test, but the cost had been her innocence and the complete erasure of her privacy. She felt hollow, tainted, and profoundly used. She was a Roman wife, officially verified, but the warmth of the marriage bed had already been poisoned by the cold, public procedure. She had been documented, sealed, and now she was ready for the next, equally cold part of the transactional night. Once the physician Gaius finished inscribing his verdict, and the matriarch had examined the parchment with sharp, satisfied eyes, the witnesses finally began to leave. The two elderly aunts nodded stiffly, offering Livia no words of comfort, only a look of detached approval. The matriarch paused only to give Marcus a quick, approving squeeze of his hand, a silent congratulation on his successful acquisition. Then they were gone. The room, which had been oppressive with the presence of many, suddenly became terrifying with the presence of only one other person, Marcus Valerius. He finished his cup of wine, finally turning his attention to Livia. He saw her shivering, pale, and naked, but he saw no distress. He saw only the certified asset the ritual had proven her to be. The process was not truly complete until the final seal was applied. He approached her, his expression utterly blank. The act of consummation, following the cold, clinical verification, felt less like the beginning of a marriage and more like the final, necessary stamp on a legal document. It was a final, painful act of duty with no hint of warmth, love, or even passion. When it was over, Marcus simply turned his back, extinguishing the oil lamp next to the bed and plunging the room into near-total darkness. Livia lay awake until the first sliver of Roman dawn touched the high windows. She was not just physically sore. The deeper wound was the emotional scar left by the public, humiliating inspection. She felt hollowed out, as if her very essence had been stolen and replaced with the cold, hard realization of her status. She was not a partner. She was a tool of inheritance. The next morning, the ritual's effectiveness became terrifyingly clear. The news of the verification did not travel by word of mouth. It traveled on wings of power and certainty. Servants moved around Livia with a new, subtle difference in their manner. The day before, she was the nervous, uncertain bride. Now, she was the proven mistress of the house, the one who had successfully passed the test. The household knew that the marriage was valid, the Valerie lineage secured, and her place in the hierarchy was set in stone. The most profound change was in Marcus. Now that the contract was sealed and verified, his attitude shifted from distant indifference to a sort of satisfied ownership. He was more talkative at breakfast, not to Livia directly, but speaking about her to his mother as if she were a successful vineyard or a newly acquired estate. "Livia has done her duty well," he remarked to the matriarch, not lowering his voice, even though Livia was seated right next to him. "The line is secured. We can now move forward with the matter of the dowry settlement. Livia understood then that the ritual had created a permanent, invisible wall between them. He could never look at her as a person, only as the mechanism that delivered the necessary heir. The shame and the coldness of that chamber would be the true foundation of their marriage, built not on shared affection, but on proven utility. When she ventured out into the villa, the whispers followed her like shadows. At the public baths and the temples, the other wives of senators and powerful men greeted her with a calculating respect. Their smiles were thin, and their eyes held that same clinical assessment she had seen in the matriarch's gaze. They all knew about the verified virginity, the cold process, and the value it placed on her. Her marriage was not a secret love story. It was public knowledge confirmed by an official, recorded document. Livia realized that she would spend the rest of her life as the wife who was not just married, but documented. A living testament to the brutal, transactional nature of power in Rome, where a girl's body was a battlefield for politics and prestige. Her only defense was to retreat into a deep, cold silence, just like the marble walls of the villa that now encased her. Years passed in the Valerie household, not marked by joy or companionship, but by the cold, predictable rhythm of duty. Livia became the matrona, the respected mistress of the house, her position secured by the painful events of her wedding night. She fulfilled her transaction with cold efficiency, providing Marcus with a strong, healthy son, the precious heir that all the gold and the ceremonies had been meant to deliver. She bore other children too, but her heart remained closed, frozen, a fortress against the vulnerability she had been forced to endure. Her survival depended on her ability to become as hard and indifferent as the marble statues that adorned the Valerie villa. She learned to manage the household with flawless precision, to host banquets without showing emotion, and to speak the correct, detached political language with the other senators' wives. The innocent girl who had arrived in Rome clutching an ivory elephant was gone, replaced by a woman who was sharp, capable, and profoundly empty. Marcus, now a highly respected consul, looked upon his wife with a kind of distant, contented pride. She had delivered his legacy and maintained his honor. He never spoke of that first night, but the invisible document, the physician's report that sat locked deep in the family archives, was the true silent partner in their marriage. It was the knowledge of the verification that kept his pride secure and Livia's silence absolute. But the most horrifying realization for Livia was that the ritual did not end with her. She watched the pattern repeat itself. Her husband's cousins married. Her own younger sister, eventually, was sent to Rome to make a similar political alliance. When the new, young brides arrived, Livia, now the powerful matrona, was expected to be a witness. She would stand in the chamber, dressed in her finest silks, her face a perfect mask of senatorial dignity, and watch the terrified girls stripped bare by the matriarch's aunts. She saw the same raw shame, the same crushing loss of self, the same desperate plea for human kindness in their eyes that she herself had once worn. Yet, she did not intervene. She could not. To speak out against the verification ritual was to speak out against the very foundation of Roman power and property law. It was to admit that her own marriage, her own son, and her position were founded on a barbaric act. She had become a silent guardian of the darkness. Her own soul became a stone in the great Roman Forum, solid, enduring, a marker of history, yet cold and lifeless. She was a perfect Roman wife, dutiful, fertile, and completely detached from feeling. She had learned that in Rome, the greatest civilization in the world, a woman's worth was not measured by her intellect, her character, or her kindness, but by the physical proof recorded on a physician's scroll. This ritual, this cold, clinical accounting of a girl's body, was the deep, unacknowledged rot at the core of the empire's glittering facade. The great writers, the esteemed philosophers, and the lawmakers of Rome, the ones who spoke so eloquently of justice and civility, never wrote down the details of that wedding night. They purposefully left it out of the historical record, trying to bury the barbarity beneath layers of law and luxury. They wanted to erase it, but history is not only found in the scrolls. It is etched onto the bodies and souls of the victims. Livia, the girl who paid for a political treaty with her heart and her humanity, was the living proof. She was a woman who stood for the rest of her life in the glorious sunlight of Roman prosperity, yet carried the chill of that wedding chamber within her, a permanent, unspoken wound, the price of being property in a world that mistook power for true honor. The horrifying truth was sealed, not in the archives, but in the silence of every successful Roman Matrona.